Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Cocktails and Pajamas. This is our 35th episode. I'm just wrapping my head around that and thinking this is really exciting that we have been doing this for over 35 weeks. I mean, we recorded 35 weeks ago, but Vanessa and I started this probably 2 months prior to that. And so um, we started this Cocktails and Pajamas because during the pandemic, we were literally in our pajamas meeting online at 7 p.m. with a cocktail and just having these really deep and rich conversations where we talked about our lives and how we were doing relationship and whatnot. So we'll get into that a little bit more in our conversation with the three of us, but I'm Heidi Ferguson. I'm a psychic and medium, and I also do spiritual guidance with my clients. And this is Fadesta Ramsey, and she is a kick-ass relationship expert coach. And I'm going to let her introduce Irene.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, yes. I am so excited to be here with my dear sweet friend Irene, who is in her own right a badass therapist for adolescents, family, and more. We met at a crystal bowl gathering many, many moons ago, and yeah, just found connection and authenticity with each other. And I've continued to recognize in my relationship with you what kind of friendships I actually want. So you were definitely the first friend in LA who I was like, okay, I think this is what I've been wanting in my life. And I continue to learn from you and continue to be in growth opportunities with you. So I'm looking forward to, yeah, just diving in. Thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you both, Vedishta and Heidi, for inviting me. This is so much fun. I can't wait to talk more and discover more about how we're going to do this.
Yeah.
So normally we start with a little bit of a check-in, just like what's alive for you or what do you want to be seen in right now? Just something that's could be brief, it could be a little elaborate, but yeah, I would love to open the floor to either of you. What do you want to be seen in right now as we start?
I would love for our guests to start.
Will do. There's always so much alive for me. I'm grateful that I'm able to show up for both of you. Just an hour ago, I was like tired, dragging my feet. And so I'm glad to be here. And what's also really alive is I'm looking for a home. So it's a big deal. It's sweet. It's going to be a long, a long process because, you know, the beginning is the beginning and then it's only going to get better. That's the intention. Thank you.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I know the yearning for a home has been calling to you for a while. And so to sort of begin that dream feels really exciting. And yeah, I feel a hopefulness in my heart hearing that.
Thank you. And I want to add, of course, our workshop, which I'm sure we'll get into in a moment. So.
Irene, I have a question about that. Are you looking to stay in the LA area on the West Coast in California, or are you considering moving outside that area, maybe across the country, or?
Definitely Southern California. I'm going to stay here. That's my goal. That's my wish. There's no intention and there's no need at this point to move anywhere else.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So how are you?
Yeah, thank you. And it's only Wednesday, right? Like, how's that possible? It's only Wednesday, but so one of the things that I've been dealing with in the last couple of weeks is this really intentional self-care and how I'm doing that and how I'm navigating that. And one of the things that I kept hearing is to really slow down. And then I do what I call witness meditation with a friend of mine, and she's like, well, how would it be to maybe reword that and think of it as living your life with flow and ease as opposed to slowing down, because slowing down can sometimes sound like or feel like a judgment, and I'm like, oh, I really like that. So I would say my intention, like something I've been really focusing on in the last 5 days, is to live more in flow, and the decisions I make coming from that space. And so today I had 2 healthcare appointments back to back, and on Monday I canceled one of them because I was just like, I don't want to do that. It just felt like too much. And so I'm like, God, I'm really glad that I'm taking care of myself. And I chose the gentler one, which is my chiropractor, whom I love and adore, and she's just funny and easy to be with. And so I would say flow and ease right now are really up for me, and working to bring that forth more and more in my life. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And Ms. Ramsey, what has been happening for you?
Well, I think first and foremost, creating this workshop with Irene that we might share a little bit about later, just like a real stepping forward, a real offering. Like Debbie Ford used to say, if it doesn't make you excited, terrified, and blushing at the same time, it's not as big as your soul. And I think what we're creating is all of those things in a really good way. So it feels like the really juicy offering. It's like if I could create something, and to create it with a best friend is like so awesome. To be like, this is what I'd want to teach if there were no rules, no considerations, just really what I want to shout from the mountaintops. It's relational skills. So that feels like a big deal, and a really sweet, like, in my body, it feels right. It feels true. It feels expansive. And yeah, that's been on my mind because we've been creating it the last 2 weeks and spending many hours together and making decisions. Heidi, you remember with the well, right? There's like all these decisions to make for it to go well. So yeah, that feels really like alive in my own body. Just even talking about it, I feel like there's enthusiasm. I think that's the word. That's something I've been missing. It's like enthusiasm around something.
So I'm curious, the workshop, the overall theme of the workshop is intimacy, and what else? I'm not, because I saw your Instagram post, and I even saw your Facebook post. I'm just curious if you can say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, Irene, do you want to? I'm happy to tag team with you here.
Yeah, let's try this. Intimacy and relationships and communication. Can I keep saying more about it? And post-COVID, I know we're technically not post, but we are. Like, I'm calling it, I'm naming it. Post-COVID, then the relationships we saw were really, really critical, right? Who we are within ourselves, how we act, both our shortcomings and our gifts, and then showing up with someone else for others, and how to communicate better. And then the fun part, the juicy part, is I really want that this is co-ed. It's like, in this day and age, right? In this day and age, I'm like, where mean and ugly is not what we want. We don't have, we're aware that we don't have to wear a mask. And men have the hardest time as well with that. And so we have an intimate setting where we're creating this safe container where I say we're going to practice. It's only 16 weeks that we'll do this on a weekly basis. And that is a very strong basis, right? Strong basis for change, for improvement, for going deeper. I'll pause there so you can continue, Farishta.
Yeah, I love that. That's so beautiful. I'm like, we need to type some of that down. But yeah, we called it braving intimacy because when I look at the work I do with my clients, the majority of their issues, their conflicts are coming from the fact that they're not being their true selves. Right? So something happens, this person's upset, they don't say anything, they suppress it. This person feels it, they don't say anything. And all of a sudden you've just got inauthentic relationships happening all over the place, and then something blows up because everyone's been suppressing really significant feelings. And the opposite of that in my work is like, what's on your heart? What does your heart want to say to this person? Now dig up the courage and say it in the kindest, most honest way possible, because then there's a chance for this other person to respond to those needs, to that awareness. And without it, like, you're not even giving people a chance, right? So braving intimacy is the core of the work I do. When we started talking about it, it's like, oh, you have a need? Okay, now name it. Now tell your partner. Now feel the risk of sharing that and maybe not getting the need met, but doing it anyway. So it's really braving communication, and that's where trust is built. That's what I've noticed. When couples have been able to actually say the thing they've been holding back, love blooms, trust builds, intimacy definitely builds. And it's scary. It's a huge risk. You know, the existential vulnerability of loving and being loved really requires honesty. So when we spoke about how do we teach this with Irene's, 30 plus years as a therapist, with my time with shadow work and relationship coaching, how do we bring what we both know together in a really rich way so that people can practice? And we talked about, is this a women's group, right? The traditional, like, are we holding women? And I think we both agreed, like, there's going to be women who have struggles around men and men who have struggles around women, and maybe they should be in the pot together to practice, so that there's no, I don't know what the right word is, but like inauthentic container. That's not going to be real life, right? That they only share their vulnerability with the same gender, so to speak.
So this isn't necessarily for couples only. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Anyone who's ready and wanting to be partnered and needs those skills. Anyone who is partnered and going like, why the hell do we keep having these same issues? Mm-hmm. Anyone who's even recently divorced, who's like, what is it I really want moving forward? And couples. I think, how do we do this better? Even if one partner shows up, it shifts the paradigm of the relationship.
Sure.
They're modeling something different.
Right.
And I was going to say, hey, and I'm single for now. And what is this dance? I can do the intimacy part with my girlfriends, right? It's like with deep, like with this caring relationship, like fetish does, like, oh, you show up, you don't have an issue with intimacy, but somehow I do. And so let's figure this out. And there's nothing more powerful than doing it together in group and then in a safe space. And then, it's pretty cool because then I get to be with my really, really dear friend. You're a bestie, if there's like, and and showing up with courage. I think that's my word this year. I need to keep showing up with courage because there's areas in my life where I had not been showing up with courage. It's like, just be courageous. And then we grow from there. So I'm excited, whether single, this is for everyone, right? And I think some people also want to be honest with themselves. It's not always been the practice when we're so much in the gadgets and external stimuli. We don't necessarily get to have time in with ourselves to really, that's where the juicy part is. Because if you're talking about, like you said, fetish style, being authentic, well, we first have to start with here within and go and work through that before we can really show up in a respectful and loving and a compassionate way. It's like, so, bringing in Brene Brown's wholeheartedness and the interpersonal neurobiology piece of like Daniel Siegel, and really what I called that's why I call my work integrated therapy. It's like we're all aspects of ourselves are showing up, because I'm great at 10 a.m., not so great at 10 p.m. So how do I do that tango? Anywho.
Yeah. Heidi, is any of this like landing for you? Is there anything that like sparks a conversation?
Yeah, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking to myself, yes, and I'm also aware that, because I've been in a couple partnerships, and if the person who is willing to be intimate and can be intimate and has done that work, so in other words, in order for anyone to be in a place to be intimate with another person, they have to have that relationship with themselves. They have to be in a place where they are intimate with themselves. And that's not just sexual, that's not just self-pleasure, that's everything. Because I think the mindset for many people, when they hear the word intimacy, they just think sex. And I'm like, I'm like, no, because it's so much more than that. It's deeper and richer than that. And and so and I'm just, it's interesting listening to you both, and so I'm remaining open and curious. Let me just say that. Yeah.
I'll just say I appreciate that. Thanks, Heidi.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the thing that's really sweet too is just even seeing who feels called to this, right? Like it's a total good faith experiment that we're like, hey, this is something we'd love to share. Let's see who needs this. And there's something really beautiful about what you both said about that inner awareness, that relational self-awareness. Like, how do I impact others? What do I really need? All those questions. Because two things seem to happen when one partner starts to grow or in a relationship, is either the other person starts to see it modeled and is like curious, or that just ends up not being the relationship, the growth-minded relationship they need. And either way, it's still life forward movement. Thank you. It's so sweet to see two of my friends on stage with me here. There's just something you said, Irene, about the importance of relationships and friendships during this last, I keep saying year and a half, and I feel like it's longer-ish, right? But
it feels longer. Yeah.
I'm curious for both of you, if you'd like to share the importance of friendships or the medicine of friendships, what that's been like for you since the pandemic started.
Go ahead, Heidi.
It's been my life force. It has been my life force. And I've been doing it all in this form. Although it's interesting because two of my local friendships, I was getting together we were being safe, we were social distancing and all that whatnot. And then things have shifted, and I'm not so much in contact with those women, which is, you know, things move. And so this has been really my blood. And because I have been very intentional about making appointments and setting things up and having things on my calendar and showing up on, like, not so having the expectation for myself, but also trusting, part of intimacy, trusting and having and trusting that the other person's going to show up and be consistent as I am expecting myself to be, having that expectation and trust for the other person has been, I don't even have the words. It's so important. And that is what has been the maintenance, if you will, of the intimacy of our relationships. Because without it, does it really matter? Like, without it, I don't want those relationships. Unless there's trust and intimacy and authenticity, I can talk about the weather for about maybe 5 seconds. And sports, I don't do sports. So quite honestly, you know, yeah. So that's where I am with it.
The question again, because I'm really hearing you and feeling you, Heidi. Thank you for that honesty. And actually my heart's like, oh my gosh, mostly on Zoom or all on Zoom?
Well, we've all been in a pandemic. We've all been isolated, right?
Well, fortunately, I've been able to go on hikes one-on-one with people.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah, I think California
so I'm like,
has the weather probabilities we only have in the summer, you know, late spring, summer, early fall. I think winter was a difficult, like, oh, let's go snowshoeing or something. But yeah, the question, my love, is like, how has friendship been medicine, like good medicine for you through this time?
Being able to have the practice of going on a hike and then having a few of those friends that would do that hike with me. It's like being in that pod and being outdoors. Gosh, I didn't realize you were in New York, Heidi. So like, yeah, being
I'm in
California. Philadelphia. Oh, that's right. I'd heard about that. So it's very different. So the friendships have been critical. My family is not in this city, not near. So it's for them, they needed to isolate and be more like in their pod and not really open up much for, you know, safety purposes for everyone involved. I get that. Those friendships, I'm hearing you, Heidi. It's like, I know I had at least one I could think of that I really couldn't rely on, or if those that I couldn't rely on, they didn't stay. They pretty much left my calendar per se really quickly, because I really needed someone, those individuals to rely on. And so yes, once COVID started to open, or slow down, and so the world started to open up, then I lost the regular contact with a couple of those friends. And so it was literally, me sentí desprendida. I got unhooked. And so it was kind of like if you're dancing with a partner and then they let go on those rare moments, or you're like, you miss. And so it's like the free falling sensation. I think you caught me on one of those. I had to reach out like, hey, I really need to talk to someone, because that was a lifeline. I think you used that word, Heidi. That was my lifeline. And so it's like reestablishing, okay, I know I can stand on my own 2 feet. I know I want to socialize. I need that. My heart and soul wants that in person. And so that's been, it's been fun. And then I've had that beauty, Ferishta and I had been a part of an international women's group. So meeting with people around, women around the world was, and on a weekly basis on Zoom, we were already used to that. So it was so grounding. That was so grounding to connect and see each other and have that outlet, and 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 hearing what's happening in everyone's world, like other people's lockdowns, when things are opening up. It's like hearing the different stages of where people are at, including if people felt sick or how they were dealing with COVID, and in a really spiritual way.
Mhm.
Like, how do I really heal myself? How do I listen to myself? How do I do some self-care? That was really important anyhow. And so being able to be witness to that was really sweet too. So friendships and family, I missed family so much more. And yeah, and wanting more of that intimate time with them, because then life is really precious, right? It's like we really don't know what's going to happen. So it was very real.
Yeah.
Passing the baton to you, Ferishta. Want to speak to friendships and during this time? And
Yeah, my love. Thank you. I'm feeling that tenderness in my heart, just hearing the dance spin where you're not tethered on the return. Yeah, and I know for you too, Heidi, it's like the orbiting out. Some friendships have orbited out in this time, and we can totally be like, yeah, and that's what happens, and it's okay. And there's the emotional labor, I think, of mourning it also in our work, right? Like, oh, I get it, and it's fine, and there's seasons, and people come and go, and there's like this place that still needs to grieve. Like something's changed, and maybe not within our wanting it to change. Yeah, just feeling tenderness there. I've had friendships go that at the time just felt like a little bit of a rip for me. With this pandemic, though, I learned two really interesting things. I'm not like a full-blown extrovert, and I used to like know everybody and know everybody they knew, kind of, right? Like if I walked down my neighborhood bumping into like 10 people and almost being like proud of that or happy about that. And when the pandemic happened, I first responded with a lot of fear. I felt a lot of fear in that first week or two, just not knowing what was really happening, having some old trauma responses come up from my own childhood. And then climbing over that, there was this, I don't want to be around everybody. And I even mean that digitally, right? There was a real clear demarcation that I don't need the whole orchestra. Like I might have had the like 80-piece orchestra as it related to friends and acquaintances and people I could have coffee with. I only wanted my first chairs. Like there was a real visceral like no to all the extra. And those were all really amazing people. But my bandwidth, my nervous system was like, I want the first chair cello and the first chair violin and the first chair, of my orchestra, because it became very clear who my inner circle was, because they were the only people I would want to see when I was a mess, when I was in fear, when I felt like I was a disaster, or when I wanted to be held or celebrate. Like there was a very specific group of people, you both included, that were nourishing to my rather threadbare nervous system. And I really realized there's a lot of people that I did spend time with that were wonderful and depleted me versus nourished me. It's a really huge shift, even kind of coming out of this pandemic, being like, I actually probably will say no a lot more. It's been important to know who those people are, and it's been important to nurture those relationships more consistently. And vital to my well-being, We have Zoom screenshots from week 1 to like whatever it is now, week 67, of people who fill me up and light me up and pour faith into me to be like, oh yeah, this is what this time's been about for me. That's what I want to remember.
I would say my no muscle has gotten a lot stronger. And I would say, you know, it's almost 2 years, whatever, year and a half. It has, because I've exercised it, it's gotten a lot stronger, which means it's gotten a lot easier to say no. And I've used your first chair metaphor many times, as you know, and very clear about who my first chairs are. And that's even shifted a little bit, which I kind of expected it to. And I'm like, and that's okay. And there's grieving to go with that. And, but wow, just being like, knowing what, like you said, the bandwidth, knowing what I can tolerate and what I'm okay with a group of people on Zoom. I would say if I'm with more than 5 or 6 people for an extended period of time, I will turn my screen off, turn my volume off, and just observe. A lot of times, turn the volume, not completely off, but turn it down, just because I don't need to hear all the chatter. It doesn't serve me. And so I don't need to hear one person ask 8 people, how are you? How are you? How are you? I'm just like, I want to say, shut the F up. Like, just stop it. Cause it's really like, you know, anyway. So that's my level of tolerance. I just don't have it. And I'm not going to apologize for it. I'm just like, this is who I am. And I would also say that too, like, apologizing has really gone out the window. I just, unless it's absolutely necessary, where I know that I've hurt someone unintentionally, which breaks my heart anyway, but unless it's necessary, I'm not going to apologize. I'm so freaking over it. I am.
This feels really important, I think, because we're all 3 of us highly sensitive and empaths and intuitives, and maybe not sponges. I don't think we're as porous as I remember myself to be in my 20s. And, right, this means like sensory overload can happen for us in many ways. So I'm curious, Irene, for you, places where you get flooded, and then also any places, knowing you as a therapist, where you've learned to self-regulate, right? I like Heidi's, like, I'm just out of here. I like that. And then there's times where it's like, I can't leave this meeting. And like, how do I still stay anchored? Right? Yeah.
Say more. Okay, there were 3 points: self-regulation, like, and what I needed.
Yeah, and like, as a highly sensitive person, like, places maybe some of our audience doesn't realize HSPs can get flooded or dysregulated.
I'll try and answer. So this is what comes to mind. From March through December of last year, right? So is that 9 months?
9
Whatever.
months.
Do that math. Okay. I did not know that I was, well, this is what I discovered. I discovered I'm really anxious. I had not labeled it. I had an idea, but I had not labeled I'm really anxious. Like, I was in my little, I'm looking at the kitchen, like, that was the box, or where I'm at now. I'm like, okay. So it wasn't so much ADHD, but I was like anxious. But I also learned, I'll address that right now. And attention. Oh my God, my attention span. I was like, I didn't know where to focus, because people anchor me. I love people. I work part-time with a school and part-time private practice, and either way there's people. So it's like, I need to know that I'm impacting people. And so just speaking to either a colleague, you know, in terms of work related stuff, or one of the clients, usually with the parent about their child, that was so regulating for me. It was like, it was on purpose, that I could live my life on purpose. This is why I'm here. Like, this is literally why I'm here. I could be here. Okay. In terms of my attention span, also internally, I asked a girlfriend, you know, the beginning of last summer, I'm like, oh my God, I think I'm more ADHD than I knew, or I might go to the doctor, you know, I might ask for medication. She's like, no, try this. And maybe it was during the pandemic, maybe it was before. She goes, try this for at least a month before you go there. So what was it called? They're called brain gym. Do these, anyways, you do this, you do squats and you breathe in as you go down and breathe up. She's a pranic healer. So Cynthia helped me practice that. And so that also gave me the longevity, the taskmaster, like I was able to accomplish things, like gave me the brain power. I got very sensitive. I felt like I was having hot flashes with the camera on Zoom. And so I got these blue light filter glasses because the ones I had were not sufficient. So there was a lot of playing around with this. And I turned off my camera as often as I could. I knew, like, decrease the amount of clients I see on a regular basis. And spread it out, like just, or at least, right, give myself more time in between to take a breath, to stretch. So that was really helpful. Like, there was a lot of learning curve, right? We were all learning so much about self-care. And then I've also learned, I think I'm more sensitive to the sounds. They were so annoying because we were already, right, stretched. And so working from home and the garbage truck and the leaf blower and someone washing their car or someone having music, or recently people have forgotten that people are still working from home, and like the car alarms, I'm like, oh my God. And then this was too much for too long. And also having patience with with others who had hard time when my birds were still in the kitchen and they could hear the birds tweeting. Sure, Fetishta included, but she wasn't the only one. And so it's like consistently or constantly checking in with people. How is it today? Can you hear me? Is it okay? And they're like, it's all right. Or if I ran a group, I actually got to run several groups. I'm so grateful. You know, Zoom, it's like, amen, thank you. And then making sure I move the birds. If my coworker, my colleague would say, I can't hear you. Oh my gosh. And then the patience with my Wi-Fi. That doesn't have to do with self-regulation, but that had to do with patience and building that patience. It's like, I just don't have it here. I've asked. People know it. my camera's off because anyhow. I think I've answered everything. Noises, right? All of that. Noises, smells. I don't know. I think I've answered the question.
I love it.
How about you two?
I love that you touched upon the levels of patience that were required. You have one more?
That's right. The plus that I started with March through December. And then I plowed through all of my paperwork, my client paperwork at the end of December, my annual to do. And it was super duper hard to go from being to doing. But then it pushed me over the edge so that starting in January, I felt like something fully opened up and I got over it and I got into learning, Canva and all of that. So the sweetness and the pride and of just trying and learning something new and being really proud of that. It's like, oh, all I have to do is play. If I just allow myself to play, that's the courage piece that I'm talking about. I wasn't courageous before, or I didn't even know, right? Did I know? We were just trying to live. So I got courageous, and here I am on another podcast. So thank you again.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, and I've experienced you being courageous as we start a workshop, and all the tech and the learning curves, and even the synergy of us being so different. You know, I'm very much like action steps, bullet points, deadlines, and Irene's like intuiting and, you know, flowing with the universe and dowsing and getting answers that way. And it's just been so interesting to see how complementary those can be versus butting heads, because they're so different. Like there's such team strength in how different we are. Yeah, and so much of what you both said resonated. Like, as someone who's so sound sensitive, you know, and so sensitive to my environment, I think the environment for me is a big deal. I'm so grateful to live in a place that's relatively quiet, faces the water, and I moved in with my partner in July of last year. And so there was 2 entrepreneurs, 2 teachers, 2 people on Zoom, 2 people with teaching hours, you know. And if I was coaching, I'd be like, I'm going to be in the bedroom, but at noon I need the piano because I'm doing voice. I'd be like, okay, I'm teaching Tai Chi in the living room, but then at noon I'll go into the bedroom and teach the other thing. And there was this almost comical musical chairs of which rooms we used for what and how we navigated that at the beginning of moving in. It had to be done. It had to be done. And just being like, wow, this is not exactly how people normally move in, right? Like moving in a pandemic. It's like, oh, we'd have a housewarming and then we'd kind of be off doing our own things. I'd have Thursday happy hour with the girls, or I'd be at yoga or whatever. And instead it's like a little petri dish with us both in it, and seeing each other more than I think we'd seen each other, obviously dating, right? So it was a big PhD in like cohabitation, but on steroids, because it was the pandemic. And I found for me, you know, some people underfunction under stress, right? Some people just zone out to Netflix or do whatever helps them self-soothe, right? They auto-regulate. I tend to overfunction under stress. And so for me, I had packed my schedule with clients. I had packed my time. I had like these 5-minute cracker breaks, which Irene remembers, where I'd be like, I gotta go eat something before the next thing. I actually, unbeknownst to myself, went into over-functioning stress mode, because there was purpose in helping my clients or teaching my students or supervising coaches in training. There was a ton of purpose in that, but I was on some level also escaping in the busyness of it. So I had to kind of right-size that, because I got tired, I got burned out. And it became clear what part of that was healthy purpose and what part of that was over-functioning anxiety and stress. But it took a while. It took a long while to be like, oh, wait, you're just trying to avoid the feelings by serving, instead of letting the serving be this alchemical contribution and then resting and feeling the feelings. It's interesting, given my line of work, that even I had that blind spot going into a stress response. And coaching has helped me self-regulate. I can't say I've learned patience, but I've learned how to like sit with myself a little more or name a need better. I used to be so polite, like I might have never said anything about your birds, and then I would have been simmering quietly. I've just learned that that doesn't serve a friendship. But it feels vulnerable and edgy to name something that's in the environment that's bothering me, because making up a story doesn't bother everybody. And then, you know, feeling like, oh, I'm sensitive. that it's like, no, I like really, I am. And yeah, owning sensitivity. That's it for me.
I'm just thinking about how many times I've been on a call with a group of people, and I don't mean to offend men, but I will say a lot of times it's men more than women who just, the awareness is missing. Like they're clearing their, like people, you know, someone's talking and they're clearing their throat, and all they have to do is mute, or they cough, and I'm just like, you know, or you know, the person, you know, leading the training or whatever will say, we're going to take a 7-minute break. Pardon me, I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me, or whatever. And so in my mind, I'm like, that means silence, right? Because I love silence. Not for everyone, you know, because there's a lot of this, and I'm just like, oh. So then I just mute. I'm like, I have to mute, just, you know, or I mean, turn the volume down, because I don't necessarily want to hear the chatter. But it's been interesting how I have found myself regulating to this Zoom environment, because there's a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Manners, just kind of like what's the word I'm looking for? When you
Etiquette.
have etiquette. Thank you. Yes, there is, and I feel like I think that it would have been really great if Zoom would have included etiquette, like Zoom video etiquette, like how to do this when you're not speaking, if you're in a large group or whatever. Silence yourself. If you need to take a break, or if you're hungry, turn your camera off, because I don't need to, you know, like I don't want to see people eating with their mouth open, because not everybody has manners, you know what I mean? And anyway, so it's a lot of that, but I don't think that people, I think people are like, well, I'm sitting in front of my laptop and, or my, you know, my monitor, and I'm just going to live my life. And I'm like, would you pick your nose if you knew that 85 people were watching you? I mean, I don't know, but yeah. So etiquette has been a big one for me, and I'm so like probably to the nth degree self-aware and very vigilant about it. So I see myself being critical, and I'm just like, ugh. And I can also, you know, imagine my mother going, oh my gosh, did you see that person? You know, so anyway, that's not here nor there, but we're all human, and I think we're doing the best that we can. And I will say that I have felt probably the most compassion for for teachers and kids who have been doing this, because what I've learned is that when people are in class, they're not allowed to turn off their cameras. So they have to be on full view the whole time. And I'm just like, there's just something not normal about that. It just really feels, I'm just like, no, it's just not, I don't know. I really feel for those people, because you know, think about the kid. Like, I can't even imagine myself as a kid having to do this. I would have been, I don't know, I might have had to commit myself. Like, seriously, would have had a breakdown, you know. Yeah, so just feeling very sensitive to anyone who struggles and doesn't know how to self-regulate or take care of themselves, or can't. Yeah. Yeah.
So. I really appreciate you bringing that up, because I know, you know, Irene and I, we talked about this on a different podcast, sort of the impact on teachers, parents, adolescents that you have worked with in terms of not just ordinary life, but then pandemic, and then, you know, the financial hits, I imagine, and then the emotional burden of it. So I'm wondering if, you know, I know it's not a concise headline kind of topic, but I'm wondering if there's anything you want to share about what you've held, what you've witnessed and seen with your clients, or with the school, right? Like with the compounding effects of this time.
I mean, it's ginormous. I'll try to say one sentence of awareness, because obviously it can't capture everything. I mean, overall, everyone has a different experience, and depending on the community that you lived in and work with and work at, I'm really proud of many of the administrators who were able to take the wholehearted approach and be much more flexible with their teachers. What I experienced is teachers having really putting it upon themselves and like almost self-blame if their students weren't excelling. But the stress level was so high for so many, you know. Especially if you had to be on Zoom, especially if you had multi-generational homes where, again, people of multi-generations living in the same home. So the self-care was with everyone staying inside. That's what really, I wish they didn't do that. I wish they were fiercely aware that they're more in charge of their health than they realize. And now I'm talking about families, you know, it's like, I really wish they went out and did a lot more self-care. And for me, that's in the sun and in nature. It's not a secret for me. That's the big healer. So that was frustrating that it was like, stay inside. I'm like, that's not a great motto. I hated that motto. I needed to get out. There was no way for my mental health. No, I'm not staying in. I will go crazy. I will. So I really felt for the teenagers, any student. We all need people, some more than others. Those students who actually didn't need to conform to that pressure of like their peers, they had a great time online. They excelled. It was so much better. Those who didn't really suffered. And if they stayed inside and they couldn't see their friends or they didn't have phones, and the lack of privacy, my goodness, I felt more for everyone. How do you, yeah. And I couldn't do much mental health with kids if we were on Zoom and everyone else is at home. You know, the bathroom became a real thing to have some sort of privacy, but you couldn't even speak that loud, right? Because then you're still heard. But even I literally didn't have silence other than the bathroom on those, you know, leaf blowing garbage truck days. And I'll say teachers worked so much harder. I wish I could say than they should have, but I'm like, they didn't stop. Hello. Thank God for this one. This little cat. She's my lifeline. Anywho. Yeah, I think that's all I want to say about all of that. Do you want to ask something else? Are you thinking of something else by any chance?
No, that's beautiful. I think just your experience and obviously your wisdom of that time and what you were holding as a therapist and as a guide, like those places feel real to me, right? I hadn't even thought about intergenerational and lack of privacy. And here you are trying to take care of your mental health, but maybe you don't want to have grandma hearing your intimate needs or whatever the case is. Like that's legit. And I can see how, I think for teenagers, because those are the kids I work with, like how much their biological imperative was to untether from their family and go out lifeward, soulward with their peers, and not being able to do that on the level that a like 16, 17, 18-year-old would want. It was crunchy, right? Because I think at 16, when I got my first car, it's like all I wanted to do was be with my peers. And again, the biological repulsion to our parents is like a way to get out of the nest, right? And yet it's like the nest is like holding you in because of this other safety issue, totally reasonable. But just what they had to endure in the tug of war inside, and how that, I saw the mental health effects of that for sure. I saw the resilience too, right? The emotional resilience of these beings who are weathering something none of us have weathered, and so early in their lives. And I thought, man, that is like such a like a suck, you know, at that age. Prom, homecoming, boyfriend, like
graduation.
Mom. Yes, graduation. What's college gonna look like? Just all the things that they have so, in my experience, so graciously weathered. Yeah, really, really blown away by a generation this is like their first, you know, real high stress situation. Hopefully, obviously that's not true for everybody. Yeah, so yeah. And I know we're rounding out on our time, so I want to just name that and see if anything else is coming up for either of you.
I'm grateful to be able to celebrate our wins because we all learned something. We all have so much to celebrate that we made it through. And if either of you read David and Goliath by Malcolm Gladwell, he talked about basically is around that. Okay, I won't quote exactly because I'm not the best quoter. He talked about like those of us who survive any near miss, like death experience. He was referring to bombing, I think World War II. I can't remember exactly. And referencing that those who didn't die just got more emboldened and like lived. And so I know that's happening now. Like, this Delta, you know what? We've lived through, those of us who have lived through COVID. We are stronger knowing we have survived. And so that's part of the resilience building. So I'm really excited about that in others. I'm so excited. People have dropped the fear. It's like, you know what? That doesn't work for us. We're over that. We're so sick of it. Not we're going to be dumb and stupid, but an inner strength of I'm good. We are good. So I'm excited about that. So I just want to name that.
Thank you. So we are at the end of our time, and in true form and tradition, we will do a chat pack question. So tonight's question, this is a fun one. So this just kind of, just so you know, this is a very fun, it's a very different energy to what we've been doing the last hour. Anyway, so besides a new house or a new vehicle, what is the single most expensive purchase you would make if you won $1 million tomorrow?
My go-to is gifting it, not all of it, but gifting a good portion of it.
And what would you buy for yourself?
That does a lot for me. Like being a philanthropist is I want to be known as that. I've got a long way to go, but even a little bit. So what would I buy for myself besides a home and a car? As many trips to national parks with my parents as possible, and for them to have comfort. And then of course, siblings and family or friends, other family. So trips Thanks. How about you? You're welcome.
So I would definitely invest a lot of it so that I would have more, and I would certainly give a lot of it away. And I would also hire a personal chef and a cleaning person that would come in twice a week, and like literally just take care of like clean sheets twice a week. That's my dream. Have like literally, I mean, you know, for someone else to do it. Yeah. And Miss Foresta.
Well, obviously the first thing that popped up for me was a recording studio. I would have a super dialed in, lush, gorgeous space that's soundproof that I could make beautiful noise in my pajamas at any hour of the night. And yeah, the philanthropy calls my heart to just being able to share the blessings in ways that I could actually see it benefiting the beloved community. And yeah, Irene, you had me on like trips with my parents, like just being able to be like, oh, that Mediterranean cruise you guys have been talking about for decades, let's go. You know, just the ability to make memories in that way. Yeah. So memories really appreciate, material things tend to depreciate quite quickly over time in our own hearts, you know. So, yeah, I love that question. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a fun one. So thank you everyone who joined us tonight. And again, we are Cocktails and Pajamas. I'm Heidi. This is Foresta. Our guest tonight was Irene. And we were thrilled to be with you, to have this chat, time to check in with each other and talk, and give us a shout out. You know, send us a like, or if you have a question, please feel free to pop that in the comments. And we will see you next week.
Yay, thank you so much.